Hello everyone and welcome back to the second episode of the Laravel chatbox series utilising Laravel Livewire. So in the first episode we set up the foundations in terms of template, Livewire setup and authentication setup, as well as some basic database setup. In this episode I want to keep it quite short and simple, and that's just showing the group chat name if it's a group chat, and then the other chat person name if it's not a group chat. An example of this would be Facebook Messenger, where if it's a group chat, it will show the title of the group chat and then the latest message below. And then if it's just a one-to-one chat, it will show the other user's name and then the latest message below. We ain't going to implement the second stage of that straight away. We've not got around to messages yet, but we can implement the first bit and then slowly move on to the messages part. And just as a quick note, I'm going to try and keep these videos much shorter than the last episode of 40 minutes, going to keep them around 10 maybe 15 minutes watchable chunks, so that way you're not pausing and playing throughout the video to try and implement as you go, if that is a way that you learn, and just keep it nice and concise with implementing one or two things per episode. That way you can follow along much easier. So let's get started. I want to identify first and foremost if it's a group chat. For that, there's two ways I could go about this, and there's no right or wrong way, because the thing I like about coding is everyone's unique. You can code anything how you want to. Everyone thinks in a different way. For me, I'm going to add a group chat flag to the chat. That will identify if it's a group chat instantly. Now this is kind of an easier way than checking if the name column is null and then getting the users and so on, and I think it's nice to have on the chat table a flag just to know if it's a group chat or not. So let's get that implemented first and foremost. So I'm going to create the migration, add group chat flag to chat table. That should create a migration. So we've got the chats table and we're going to add the group chat flag. So I'm going to call it table tiny integer group chat. We could have a true or false actually. Can we do Boolean group chat default false? So by default the group chat flag is going to be false. I was going to do tiny integer, as that is what I've done in the past for flags, so where it's 0 or 1 will determine whether it's true or false. However, Boolean will be the words true or false, which makes it a bit more readable in the database and to follow as well. So let's get that migration ran. Invalid default value for group chat. Okay, that not work. So let's added that. So let's just give our table a refresh. And it's added. So it has added as a tiny integer. I didn't know that is what it does. I'm sure you could have had Boolean. We could have done enum. It looks like it sets the length to 1, so it can be 0 or 1. Yeah, the first time I've ever used a Boolean on a migration, so yeah, that's new for me. I'm going to hard code the default value here to 0 and save that, and then go into the chat table and it will automatically be 0. For us to then do that in the migration, we just have to do default 0. So by default, it's not going to be a group chat when you create a new chat. What we can do is if it's a group chat. So for that, it's going to be quite simple. If chat group is group chat, else end if. So at the minute, this is going to fail. So if we go to our code, we've got a fail. Undefined method is group chat, and that's because that method doesn't currently exist on our chat model. So for that, we're going to create some functions that we can use. Function to see. So a very easy and simple function is group chat, and all it's going to do is look at the chat, which will be an instance of the chat model, so the chat record, for example, check the group chat column, and if that's equal to 1, it's going to return true, otherwise it's going to return false. If it's true, it will get into here, so it will be is group chat, else is not group chat. So that covers that part. So if it's a group chat, we want to show the group chat's name. For that, very simple chat name. Else, it's not a group chat. So what we want to do for the else is show the other user's name that is part of the chat. So for that, we will loop. Well, we could technically copy this. However, we could change this for each chat users where we'll leave it as it is for now. We'll just copy this, but we might change that going forward. So that should technically work, and we get the same result because flag is not a group chat. So if I change this flag to 1, empty, because there's no group chat name. So let's give it a name, test group chat. And then what I could do is insert a new row, no name, no group chat, and on the chat user we insert a row, chat ID 2, 1, 2, 2. Refresh. Now that's not getting the other chat, that's getting our group chat. So let's have a look what's going wrong here. I didn't insert them. Did I not save the record? Okay. There we go. That should work now. Test chat person, test group chat. So the test group chat's coming from here, and the test chat person is coming from ID 2. And remember, we are excluding the authenticated user's ID, so it's going to exclude this one here. So that's working as you'd probably expect. We've got a group chat, a normal person, one-to-one chat. And again, we want to then eventually order these chats by the messages and the latest messages. But for now, we're not going to do that. We'll do that afterwards. And then again, this is the notification if there are unread messages within that chat. But again, we're going to get round to that eventually. So let's get this HTML here, this template as such, replaced with actual messages. So let's do it for the test chat person. For that, we've got chat messages table that we've set up. If we insert a new row, we're going to do this for chat ID 2 because that's our one-to-one chat, and we'll focus on the one-to-one chat first. And then after that, we'll do user ID 1, which is the authenticated user, and then we will put a message. User ID 1 test message. Then we'll duplicate the row, and we'll do that for user ID 2. There we go. So we've got our chat messages set up, and we want to show that here. So let's get that implemented. Let's go back to our code. Let's go to the area where the chats are. And let's say the left hand side are your chats and the right hand side are the other users' chats. So for this, I'm going to delete the last chat in the list, just so we know what we want to implement, and we want to replace this one with our chat and this one with the other user's chat. So for that, what we can do, and we'll hard code this for now for the chat ID 2, and then we'll change it to be dynamic afterwards. So we will, for each chats, that is what we called it, where ID is 2, messages as message, and for each. Now that should cause an error. There's no collection. Object of type collection is not callable. So let's do first. Will that work? Okay. That is right in not working because we haven't created the relationship yet. But I thought it would bring back a different error. But anyway, messages. Public function messages. Return this as many. That's it. And we've not created the message model. So let's go and create that. So we've got that message model now set up. There. And that will look at the messages table, but we want to probably override that. And in fact, we don't really want it to be message, we want it to be chat message. So we'll rename that chat message. And we don't need to override the table because it will look at the plural version, so it'll be chat messages. So we will change this to chat message class. The foreign key would be chat ID and the local key would be ID. So that's going to link to the chat messages table. It's going to link on chat ID, and that's going to be equal to the ID column on the chats table, which is exactly what we've got set up here. So let's see if our code now works. Still doesn't work. Okay. So chats where. So the way I would debug this is I'd first DD this, make sure that it's getting the right chat, which it's not, because I've got the curly brackets at the start. Good old typo. Got to love them. And then I would add on messages, and there we got 2 messages. So this should now work. It was just a typo. And we've got the 2 messages outputting below. The reason they are 4 messages, sorry, because there is 2 messages in the chat messages table. It's going to be looping through each one, so 2, and for each one it loops through, we're outputting the 2 hard-coded messages. So then what we want to do is check if the message variable or the message record is the authenticated users. So what we want to do for this is if message is authenticated users, else, and if. This is then going to error. That function doesn't exist yet. So let's create that function on our message model. And before I return anything, what we'll do is just check if we have the authenticated users instance in this function. And we do. So then what we want to do is return this user ID So what it's going to do is have a look at the user ID column on the chat messages record. And if that is equal to the authenticated user's identification column, number, whatever you want to call it, then it will return true. Otherwise it will return false. So if it's true, we want to show our messages on the left hand side, well, with the avatar on the left. And if it's false, we want to show it on the right hand side. So this is the true one. And this is the false one. Let's format that nicely. And let's go back to our browser. So now that's got rid of the extra 2, and we're just getting 2 messages in the right order and format. So to make sure the messages are in the right order, we want to order by created at descending. Yeah, and let's see if that works. That doesn't. Do I need to do a get? I probably do. There we go. So now it's always going to order the chat messages by the created at column. And just to prove this, we will create this one for 211.05 and this one for 210.55. This one's the other user, so this chat should show on top. And it didn't. That's not good. 210.05. It order by created at descending order. Which it didn't do. Why not? Because of that. There. Chats were ID 2. First messages. Order by created at descendant. Do we need to do sort by descendant? And if we get rid of the get and then do that, sort by ascending order. Strange. Am I doing this wrong? Ascending. Latest at the bottom. That's the latest. Technically that's right, yeah. Okay, getting confused there. So our message as the authenticated user is the latest message, and we want that at the bottom, not the top. So this is showing in the right order. Got there in the end. So now what we want to do is change these to show the actual message. And for that, we just do our curly brackets, message, message, which is the message column. And we can replicate that further down on the other chat. We don't want to do that, it keeps swapping to the wrong thing. So there you go, user ID 2 test message, user ID 1 test message. We obviously want the usernames to also represent the user's name. So for that, we're going to need to create a relationship, relationships, user, public function user, return this belongs to user class ID user ID. So what this is going to do is create a relationship from the chat message to the user model, and it's going to look at the ID column on the user table and link that to the user ID column on the chat message table. So just to test this out, if we then under here dd message user column not found users.user ID. Okay, I've gone the wrong way around. Typical. Having a lot of fails this tutorial, but I suppose you see firsthand kind of how a developer debugs and fixes it, how a developer kind of works behind the scenes when they're encountering these problems, and yeah, relearning it all with me, I guess. To say I have 7 years experience in coding, there is a lot of time where I do have to go on Google, Stack Overflow, and just play around till I get the desired functionality that I want. And yeah, it's kind of why I love coding. You can code any way you want, you're always encountering problems, and you're always having to use logical thinking. So yeah, I suppose you're seeing it firsthand without any like chops and cuts really. That should work. We should get an instance of our user, which is from the database. So we want the user's name. So it's the name column we're looking for on the user record. And if we've got access to the user through message user, all we really need to tag on is name. And then we replace Brad Pitt with message username. Laura Croft, message username. Simple as that. So now we should have the users' names. Although the styling's not the best there, but again, we're not focused on styling. 12 minutes ago, 13 minutes ago. So let's get that part implemented so that is relative to the actual message. And for that, that's relatively easy to do. So let's get this onto a new line, a bit of OCD, make it a bit more readable as such, or at least I think so. So let's get the first one done. How would we do that? Well, we're going to need our curly brackets because we want to do some PHP code. We want to use a plugin called Carbon, which is already installed within the latest Laravel. It used to be an additional package that you had to install, but now it comes shipped directly within Laravel. So we want to utilize that. We want to parse it, and the thing we want to parse is the created at column, and then we want to use a diff for humans function. 54 minutes from now. Are these timings? It might be that the servers are an hour ahead. Let's change this to 1. 6 minutes ago. Yeah, I'm not sure why that's doing that. Should really be like 3 seconds ago. I'm guessing the servers are an hour ahead. Yeah, strange. So yeah, we've got 6 minutes ago. So it's basically replicating what is up here, but we're doing it for dynamically, depending on the created at from the message. So let me just add some comments here. Authenticated users messages. Unauthenticated / other users messages. So it's quite tedious, I would say, to write this out every single time you want to parse the created at and then get the difference in time from when it was created or whatever date you're parsing to the current time in a readable format for humans as such. So let's create a function on our chat message model that does this for us. Function to get readable created at. Public function get readable created at. Return carbon parse this created at diff for humans. So it's going to parse the created at column and use the diff for humans function and return it back. So essentially replicating what we've done here, but what this allows us to then do is message get readable created at. And then we can do the same here. There. Go back to our browser and now it's working as it was anyway. So I think that concludes this tutorial so far. And again, we could go one step further with this function that we've created, and rather than use a function, we could use setters and getters, mutators, that sort of thing, to mutate the output of a column or data into a format that we want. I'm not sure, without reading into mutators and trialing it, whether that will do it every time you get a created at, or you could set it for specific times. For example, sometimes we may want the actual year, month, day created at value as opposed to it in readable format for humans. But for now, this function does the job, and we can utilize that. So that brings the end to this episode. Nice, short, sweet and simple, kind of how I want to continue them going forward. And let's get that like that. Just like to keep things neat. So next episode, what I want to focus on is the ability so that when you click a different chat, this chat area refreshes, essentially. So all these chat messages will refresh and show the chat messages for the chat you're clicking. That will be using Livewire, and it will be using the component that we've created in the previous episode, the chatbox component. And yeah, it's going to be surprisingly simple to do that, and I think it will shock some people, because normally, especially back in my earlier days, I would use something like jQuery and Ajax to then get the chat messages for the chat you click on, and whilst that essentially worked, this is a lot faster and it definitely feels more real time. So thank you for watching. I do apologize that there are a few mess ups throughout the video, but I also feel like that makes the video more real. You can see how I work real time without pre-planning everything, and I could quite easily write down everything beforehand in what I want to do, what I want to say, and get it perfect every single time. But I feel like coding on the go is much more fun for me as a coder, because then I get to debug things real time and learn from them and learn from all my little mistakes. No matter how small or big, I always learn from them and remember for next time. And I suppose it also goes to show that although developers with years and years of experience still run into issues, small or big, even small issues that you wouldn't even think of, they still run into, or at least I do. And although I do get the result that I want in the end, sometimes I may need to Google, sometimes I may need to play around. In the instance of the chat message, it was a case of swapping the user ID and the ID around. Again, I don't always know what order they go in. So yeah, it's something we can kind of work through together. The end product will obviously be a working chat system that you can take away, improve on, refactor, and absolutely do anything that you want to with it. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and check out for my next episode shortly. Thank you.